let's turn to Mark Brewer first, since his party controls the Congress. Why are we not getting more pork?
Well,
I have a second question, too, which will be brief.
I don't dispute the statistics. I don't think there's any question that, frankly, in Congress for many years, many of the defense dollars, for example, the Defense Department spends, members of Congress, particularly those from the South, were quite skillful at making sure that those facilities and those dollars flowed in that direction. And for a while Michigan was a relatively wealthy state, we were not as concerned about that as we should have been. Now that our status has fallen dramatically, this is much higher on the radar screen. But I think a number of the programs that Senator Obama has outlined, the $150 billion technology fund, the auto loans that we have talked about, and other things, will not necessarily reverse that flow entirely, but I think will increase our rank in terms of the amount of federal dollars that flow here, because we do need them. But I don't dispute the statistics and the facts that you pointed out.
Senator Schwartz, your party controlled Congress and controls the presidency, controlled Congress for 6 out of the last 8 years, and 9 of the 15 House members are Republicans. Why are you not bringing home the bacon?
Good question. A consummation devoutly to be wished, but it didn't happen. We improved some during the time that I was there, but not a particularly large amount. People need to realize, Don, that, and you do, that the Michigan delegation, even though we have the most senior, and actually John Conyers is the second most senior, members of the U.S. House, our delegation, with the exception of John Dingell, is not looked at as a particularly strong delegation, and we get waxed by Texas, by California, by Florida, and others. It is politics at its best or worst, depending upon how you feel about it. But we did not have, when I was there, I expect we probably don't have now, a delegation that does things in ways bipartisan, where they should do things in ways bipartisan. There is a schism between the D's and the R's in our congressional delegation. We're not throwing brickbats at each other, but you want to watch a real machine. Watch the Texas delegation sometime. Get out of the way when they're coming at you, and that has not happened in Michigan. So have we been ineffective? I would agree with Mark Brewer. We have been ineffective at getting any bang for the bucks we send to Washington.
Paul Isley, if our 17 members of Congress came to you and said, okay, we're going to work together, we heard Joe, what kind of pork should they try to bring home for us? What makes sense?
Well, certainly things that would lead towards where our current problems are, which we want to accentuate what our strength is, which is manufacturing, and things that would help that manufacturing would go a long way. I would like to note that a lot of the plans floating around to deal with the current financial crisis, however, which is leading towards talk of foreclosure help and that sort of stuff, is going to go to California and Florida, because Michigan has already gone through their foreclosure cycle, and we've had decreases in foreclosures for the last 3 months here.
Sir, I'm going to let you ask a second question. After this, I want everyone to only have one, but please briefly ask your second question.
Second question?
Yes, sir.
Second question. When we hear what you've said about the Michigan economy, it certainly is not going to have a lot of money to distribute. The universities in Michigan are considered nationally to be strong. It's not a system, but there isn't a weak one. There's not a really weak link in the university system. Universities have the power to charge tuition. Outside of the legislature, they're about, and a few fees that are charged, they can really, in a sense, tax. Would you approve or disapprove, in this difficult time, Michigan universities maintaining their strength by charging tuitions that they need to charge to maintain their strength?
You mean making up the difference with tuition hikes primarily?
Right.
But briefly, I'd like to have Senator Schwartz, who was an education expert in the legislature, answer that.
Dr. Lovers is getting back to me for all the hearings I held when he was president of Grand Valley and having to ask him questions, so that's all right. Look, we have the 15, if you take the 15 universities that we have, the public universities in this state, collectively they are the best in the United States. Collectively, they are the best in the United States. As you mentioned, if tuition goes up, that means the state appropriation has gone down, and vice versa. The universities live by their state appropriation, which is now unfortunately less than the appropriation for the Department of Corrections. It's at about $1.7, $1.8 billion now. It should be significantly more. Unfortunately, there's no more money where that came from. If the universities can justify tuition and fee increases to maintain quality, I believe that they can do that. The thing is they have to convince, not Washington that we're talking about here tonight, but the legislature who controls that big appropriation. And unfortunately, in a term-limited legislature with no one, and I mean no one in the legislature now really having in-depth knowledge about our universities, it's very difficult. So the problem exists, and it will continue to exist, and it's up to folks like yourselves to lobby the legislature to make certain these universities are supported the way they should.
Mark Brewer, should universities increase tuition to cover their shortfall?
As a party, we have a great deal of difficulty with that. I think that is, in the long run, policy that's counterproductive. We have to raise the education rates or levels in this state, however you want to characterize it. We have to give more access to post-secondary education to students without giving them a crushing debt load. And you're talking to somebody who, I didn't pay off my student loans until I was 50. About the time I got the AARP card in the mail, I'm finally paying my student loans off, and I can only imagine, and I know, the kind of debt load that today's students have. So I'm not, we're not as a party inclined to go down that path. It's a very difficult balance. I don't dispute that there are enormous pressures on them, but paying those costs on the backs of students entirely is not the way to go.
You know, he told a female friend of mine that he was 36 last week.
I won my 30 seconds now.
All right.
Just to follow what Mark said. University of Michigan has an endowment of about $7.5 billion. MSU's is a lot less than that, but still pretty good size.
Wayne State is much less still.
And Wayne State is a lot less than that. Then you have other schools that are significantly less as well, although Grand Valley is doing pretty well for a school its size and age. The University of Michigan won't suffer if the appropriation goes down a little bit every year. MSU probably won't suffer, but you kill the smaller schools. And that's the point we have to make with the legislature. The smaller schools get absolutely whacked if the legislature cuts the higher education appropriation.
Brad Isley, we were justly reminded that this forum needs to focus on Michigan issues. Remember a couple of years ago, with great Sturm und Drang, the Michigan legislature finally managed to have a balanced budget. It seems clear, if you disagree, tell me, that because of what's happening now in terms of unemployment, the legislature once again is going to be facing a budget deficit in the hundreds of millions of dollars. What can and should the federal government be doing to help Michigan with that? That's you.
Oh, that's me. I'm sorry. You had a different first name. We know that Michigan has been in the one-state recession since 2001. Everybody else came out of the recession. We didn't. We have had severe structural change in the state. And as a result, I think that that's on the order of a hurricane or a major earthquake. And I think that that requires federal money to come in and deal with it. So I think just straight development funds or even a helicopter drop would work. Because, quite frankly, we're talking unemployment numbers where we're down 200,000, 300,000 jobs. And when you're down that many jobs, you've lost all of that income. It's not coming back. And we have a lot of structural changes that have to occur on very little money.